So Katrina Blair, very excited to have her. We've wanted to have her speak for the Society for a number of years now, and I had the pleasure to meet her at the Telluride Mushroom Festival a couple years ago. And I think I can honestly say that she is definitely an exciting, energized, and really brilliant member of the mushroom community. You figure someone's inspiring if they every year walk from Durango to Telluride over 7 mountain passes eating only wild forage foods to go to a mushroom festival. That's pretty inspiring. Yeah, pretty cool. So we're lucky to have her here. Maybe, hopefully not to spoil anything, she also has an amazing recipe for a lemon puffball sorbet that maybe we can have as part of our culinary dinner or one of our holiday dinners. And also, just to announce, she does have a few other workshops coming up. So she is speaking tomorrow at the Ecology Center in Berkeley on San Pablo, I forget the cross streets, but it's on San Pablo in Berkeley. Dwight? And on Dwight, okay. On her new book, Wild Wisdom of Weeds, 13 Essential Plants for Human Survival. And that's going to be tomorrow night, so the 22nd at 7 p.m. And before that, she's actually going to lead a walk at a local urban farm called Urban Adama that's a little further south on San Pablo. So kind of going through the farm, looking at some of the weeds and other plants and kind of helping do an informal identification. So if you're able to attend that, I highly encourage it. And just a little more about Katrina. Katrina Blair began studying wild plants in her teens when she camped out alone for a summer with the intention of eating primarily wild foods. She later wrote The Wild Edible and Medicinal Plants of the San Juan Mountains for a senior project at Colorado College. In 1997, she completed an MA at John F. Kennedy University in Orinda in holistic health education. The following year, she founded the nonprofit Turtle Lake Refuge, whose mission is to celebrate the connection between personal health and the wildlands. She teaches sustainable living practices and wild, edible, and medicinal plant classes regionally and internationally. In 2009, she published Local Wildlife, Turtle Lake Refuge's Recipes for a Living Deed, which she examines the culinary and medicinal uses of the local flora. She has a new book coming out this fall. Once again, that's The Wild Wisdom of Weeds, 13 Plants for Human Survival. So please join me in welcoming Katrina Blair.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, this is a fantastic society. I'm really impressed on all the different dimensions. I had no idea. So yeah, it's truly an honor to be a guest speaker here tonight. And tonight's presentation is going to be focused on a few different aspects, but one is that I do every year take a journey to Telluride, and I choose to just walk there, and I don't want to bring any food. I want to keep my pack really light, so I eat what I find, and that is tons of greens and tons of different berries. Actually, one day on one of my journeys, in one day I ate 19 different kind of wild berries. So there's just a huge diversity of food out there that once you go into it, it just gets more rich, and I just constantly keep learning about how much out there is to sustain us. And one of the things that I enjoy in my diet is mushrooms. And I don't bring a stove, and so I've come to sort of create ceviche dishes when I'm out in the field, because I eat more like a wild animal, where I just pick and chew. You know, I don't do any food prep, minimal, that is. Once in a while, I'll integrate a little in, and I'll show you what that looks like. But there's a few mushrooms that I particularly am fond of, even just straight, raw, right out of the field. And then others I definitely prefer not to eat raw. Or if I do, I definitely want to cook them with like a juice of some kind, either a lemon or a sour berry. So, yeah, going out into the wild, the greens and the mushrooms. And I find that, I'm eating all kinds of different wild, like greens, berries, roots, flowers, as well as the mushrooms. And one year, usually when I'd go on these walkabouts, it's something I've been doing for many, many years, but I would at least bring like an apple or an avocado or something to sustain me, just in case. But then this one year I was hiking to Telluride, and this actually is in the Polygonum family. It's a bistort, alpine bistort. And these tiny little seeds were just abundant, packed, the whole hillside was packed with these little guys. And I realized after a very short time I could collect a huge handful. And after that hike, I got rid of my crutch in a way of having to bring any food at all. So I owe it to these little bistort seeds as like letting me sort of take that leap. No, actually the earth can sustain me completely if I just give over. So once in a while I used to take like a salad dressing, and that was sort of an extra treat. I haven't done that for quite a while, but that's a special thing. But as I'm wandering, I'll find the incredible chanterelles that are just poking out, starting to show a hint of their orange and their yellowish color. Of course, when you open, when you see that little white mound and then you pick it open, there's just this glorious golden color that pops out. And some of the years when I would find these, I would actually decide to marinate them, like to make the ceviche. So, several different times in Telluride Mushroom Festival, I've been asked to do a wild food feast for some of the participants. And this one year, I marinated the mushrooms with lime and then add different seasonings. But when I don't have lime, what I end up doing, especially when I'm out in the field, is I use wild sour berries. So like this summer, I ended up using tons of strawberries, where I would take the chanterelles and dice them up, and then there were so many strawberries, wild strawberries, that I would mash them up in a little bag and let them sit overnight and then eat them in the morning. And that was a really great way to sort of cook the chanterelles with the ascorbic acids of the lemon-flavored berries. But this is actually, those were marinated in lemon juice. And then even the blue chanterelles, which I found last year and this year, is such a special treat. Those also, they're amazing how chanterelles smell like apricots. These smell like blackberries. And yeah, I actually smelled them before I found them. It was very exciting. But even the boletes, this was one year where I actually brought some lemon and sliced those up. But it's the boletes and the puffballs that are my two favorite mushrooms that I eat a little bit, even just raw, when I'm out hiking. But if I do marinate them, they're actually even tastier. This is just one of the passes of getting to Telluride. I'm pointing to Telluride here. And this is part of the journey. Lots of up and down. And what I find actually is that when I'm up at that high elevation, and there's alpine sorrel, and then alpine spring beauty, even up in the talus slopes when it's way above tree line, there's still food that makes the breakfast of champions. So hawk wings is another mushroom that I don't prefer raw. I definitely like to cook it or use it in a ceviche type form. This year I was with a good team of volunteers, and we made a wild food feast for over 100 people, and it was quite amazing. We actually made so much food that we were able to feed people all the next day. Like, we just kept feeding people. We had so much food, but we made this amazing hawk's wing soup that, and we did cook those hawk wings before we made the soup, but then we added some wild onions, and there's this amazing root called, it's valerian, but it's the edible valerian root, so it's not a sedative, and it won't put you to sleep. It's actually a delicious root vegetable. But we added that to the soup, and we had a pot that was seriously this big, and it was such a huge stew. It was very delicious, and we kept feeding people on and on. Yeah, but the meal was quite scrumptious. We used porcinis we had a zucchini linguine, where we took home, grown zucchinis and a hand-cranked spiralizer and spiraled them into noodles, and then marinated the porcinis and added, fresh peppers and fresh wild onion flowers, and made this amazing pasta sauce with like a dandelion pesto. And then We had these amazing appetizers with those bistort seeds. We made like a bread with bistort and wild dock seeds, and then had, it was a ceviche with chanterelles on top of that, and then an amazing wild berry tort. Anyway, it was quite a feast. We'll recreate it again sometime. And if ever I get to be part of the hospitality, I would love that. If I'm here. Yeah, that would be fun. A treat. So yeah, here's some of the hawk's wings, lots of hawk's wings on my way. And one year, a friend of mine joined me for the last day, and we harvested a lot of the things before we arrived. And this is a coral mushroom. This year, I actually ran into two friends along the way, and they did have a stove. And so they had some coconut butter also. So I got to go a little more gourmet this year towards the end. And we were saying how, like, the chanterelles are a little bit like chicken, and then, you know, you've got the shrimp russulas that are more like seafood, and then you've got the coral mushrooms are a bit more like egg, and then the hawk's wings are a bit more like beef. So we had a whole array of quite delicious edibles. And then, of course, there's the king boletes, which is truly the prime. And when I'm out walking without other food, this is what takes, like, the edge off the hunger. And I have to say that when I'm first walking, it takes 3 days for me to make the shift of, like, civilized living into wild foraging living. And there's 3 days there that I am in transition, and I find that I'm more tired, and I'm going to take more rest, and I might have a lot of emotions come up, and I don't take myself seriously. You know, I'll go to sleep early, but by the third day, I've gone through it, and I'm so used to it now that I just, like, I know it's going to happen, and it's just okay. By the third day, that's when the energy and the inspiration shows up, and then it's something else happens. I feel like, I'm moving more in towards being a wild human species a little more, and that's fun. That's a fun experience. But I do find that the porcinis, the boletes, are just a fabulous food in those first 3 days of, like, filling the belly when there's not as much. And pretty soon I realized that, a little goes a long way. Yes, and David mentioned that 2 years ago I was given this humongous puffball that was the size bigger than all of our brains. And what we did is we cut it in half and scooped out all the meat of the puffball and put it in a bowl. We chopped it up, put it in a bowl with a lot of lemon juice, like just covered in lemon juice, and let it sit overnight to marinate. Then the next day I just blended that with honey, and it turned into the most amazing ice cream. And so then we froze it, and it was as creamy as any ice cream, and it was incredibly delicious. A mushroom lemony sorbet, if you can imagine. And that's a delicious, but then we've got this one, which isn't a puffball. It grows more into something like this. So yeah, this year it was the strawberries that provided the sour berries for my marinade. But really, any of these berries, this is the wild blueberry that grows in the forest. They're small, but this was an abundant year of these little blueberries. Really sour. And this is the sour sumac, which is a lemonade berry, a great marinade ingredient. And then hawthorn berries. Hawthorn berries are fun. They're not quite as sour. They're more like an apple, kind of a mealy apple, but they have so much pectin that they make the most amazing pie. And all you have to do is blend these berries with a little bit of, let's say, juice or honey water and cinnamon, and you already have your crust ready to go with just some pecans and dates. And you blend it up, strain out the seeds, and you have 1 minute to pour it into your pie pan before it totally sets up. And you can flip it upside down and it doesn't fall out. Like, it just firms up like Jell-O. So the hawthorn berries are really special. And there's 4 different kinds of wild currants/gooseberries that grow along the way, and they're all nice and sour, different flavors, different tastes. And then these Oregon grapeberries are really the lemon of the Southwest. And this year we had a huge crop, and so we were able to gather, truly gallons of these. And since we don't have lemon trees growing in our Southwest, it's these little berries that we use to create that wonderful sour experience. And there's another gooseberry variety. And the raspberries, of course, the wild raspberries are fabulous for same reasons of marinating and just eating. And these are a wild watermelon berry, which is streptopus, and just a succulent treat. Showing you all different kinds of wild berries. The thimbleberries, of course, grow around here too. Very similar to a raspberry. And then the wild rose, and even its rose hips. You can open them up, pick out the seeds, and then you've got this great sour fruit to add to your dish. So if there aren't berries, then there's the sour leaves of the alpine sorrel, which is kind of like French sorrel. You know, it's got that lemony twang. And there it is in seed. And it grows really high in the talus slopes. And even fir needles, all the pine trees have a nice lemonade flavor. They all taste a little different, but they're all edible. So all the evergreens, wherever you live, you know, you can taste them and find your favorite variety, but they actually are a great addition to wild mushrooms in the field when you don't have a stove. And then, you know, I didn't just eat, I would eat nettles and dandelion and clover and bluebells, and I mean, the list goes on, actually. I made a list of everything I ate this last trip, and it was over 60 species. I think it was 13 mushrooms and, it was 8 mushrooms and 60 species of plants. With the wild violets, the leaves and the flowers. And then one of my motivations for wild plants, and part of, well, Turtle Lake Refuge is a nonprofit that, you know, our mission is to celebrate the connection between personal health and wildlands. But one of my closest neighbors where I live sprays herbicides for the city of Durango. And so he stores these herbicides very close to my organic farms, like about 10 feet away. So it's a huge motivation for me to, that's why I actually wrote this book, The Wild Wisdom of Weeds, one of the motivations. And that is, you know, for me, all plants are equal. And I have total respect and tolerance for every single one of them. And I'm noticing that, wow, there's certain weeds that are getting discriminated against. And unfortunately, there's toxins that are being put on to help eradicate them from our, you know, our streets, our gardens, our sidewalks, whatever, our parks. So this has been a long journey of me working with my neighbor, who I still am neighbors with and appreciate, because it's the motivation to sometimes take this path of change. But in the process, you know, we started a wild food cafe where we integrate these wild weeds into the meal. And, you know, when we eat things, because we are what we eat, when we eat these wild plants, they become us. And all of a sudden, once you're part dandelion or part thistle, you can't help but love them. And so that's been our secret weapon, in a way, is we have a booth at the farmer's market where we sell thistle lemonade, and we sell out every Saturday, thistle lemonade and thistle root chai tea. And because this is how we're educating people, that not only this is not the bane of society, but this is actually like the best drink you could have for your liver, in addition to it being delicious. But these wild foods, and we use mushrooms in our dish. We marinate the mushrooms. This is a portobello mushroom sandwich, but we use wild mushrooms as well as some cultivated mushrooms in our meals. But it is a wild food cafe, so we'll use acorns to make acorn milk. We actually make an acorn ice cream, and all kinds of things, different berries and all the wild pies that come with it. Choke cherry macaroons is one of our staples. We make these wild goodies and then sell them to our local health food stores, and we even grow microgreens. These are choke cherries. It was a big year this year, so when it's happening, we go for it, because it might be 2 or 3 years before we get another big season of that particular berry. So then we freeze them and use them. So we have a cafe in town, but we also have this permaculture farm out next to my neighbor's herbicide garden as well. So we're, you know, sometimes the universe gives us these very ironic situations. My passion and their passion is very different. But in the process of finding value to these wild species, we created a wild food CSA. So rather than cultivating a lot of growing vegetables, we just let the wild things come up and harvest them and then integrate them into incredible foods, whether it's, wild dockseed bread or the dandelion pesto, or we do cultures like sauerkraut using the roots of these different foods, or even kombucha, where we'll add wild greens to the kombucha. And this will be the end. We've already finished the end of our 3rd season, but it's very popular and quite exciting because it's an education of how to use these often underappreciated plants. And we integrate it into our cafe, where we serve lunch twice a week, all year round. And if you ever come through Durango, Colorado, you must come visit us at Turtle Lake and come by the cafe, or if you want to come by the farm, I'd love to show you around. And we make lots of goodies at the farmer's market. And so this is the sign, that my neighbor puts out on all the parks. And unfortunately, this was put right in front of the New Horizons preschool, and there's just a little bit of a misawareness of like, wow, this actually is not what we want to be doing for our children or for the earth. And so my experiment is then to use mushrooms to help remediate. And so there's 2 mushrooms that we've been experimenting with. One is a Hypholoma sublateritium, which is actually a bricktop mushroom. And what we did in a permaculture class, we just took 2 soil samples, one that was right on the boundary of where some of the residues come, and then another that was more in fertile ground. And we inoculated both of them with, we did different, I'm actually not explaining it quite right. We took 2 soil samples that were the same, and then 2 that were same from one contaminated soil and one from not contaminated soil, and inoculated them with the mushroom and let them sit for a good month in ideal conditions, and then we sent the lab tests of the soil to see what happened. And it's still I'm still in the process of researching and kind of taking notes and studies, but it does make a difference. It's making it on a slight level. The other mushroom that we've experimented with is the white oyster mushroom, the pleurotus, and we've been just inoculating the area. And actually this year we had a lot of rain, and right after that every wooden thing around the house erupted with oyster mushrooms. So the picnic table and like the deck and, and even some plywood, like it was kind of, I ate the ones that came off of hardwood. I decided I didn't want to eat the oyster mushrooms that were growing on the plywood or the glue, the particle board. But according to some research, that the oyster mushrooms, that they actually break down the toxins, not just accumulate them. So I think there's more to be studied on that level. I don't have definitive results on that. Sometimes it's better to be safe and eat from places that you do feel comfortable with versus questionable places. But it's good to know that it can really help. And so I have a lot to learn about using mushrooms in this way, but I have a lot of time and space and reason to do it. So another reason, of course, is just the honeybee population. And the honeybees use these wild plants, the wild thistle, for their forage. And that's a really critical thing. As we civilized, move towards more concrete and buildings, we're moving plants and some of the important plants that are the bee forage. But these wild things can come up in the sidewalk cracks. And actually, I use this quote because I believe it. I used to live here. When I went to graduate school, I was living in Oakland for 3 years, and I would truly feel that like a dandelion that I would harvest in the middle of a San Francisco sidewalk crack had more value and nutrition than anything I could buy in the store. And so even though it's not the most optimal condition, in some ways, it's actually still preferred because it's these wild seeds that have just this brilliance. Like these plants, these wild plants, they haven't been altered by humanity. They're just nature inspired, and they're really built to be resilient and handle an incredible diversity of conditions. And when we eat that, we get that resiliency. We get the intelligence of that plant, which is really pristine, into our bodies. And because we are what we eat, it comes into ourselves on a cellular level, and we start to remember that we can survive here on planet Earth with what's around us. And I feel like that these wild plants are offering humanity a bridge to re-remembering our intuitive ways of, we can be sustained here, and that we have everything we need. And it helps us relax and let go of some of the fears that we might have, especially if things were to shift systems, on our systems of commodities and that sort of thing. Anyway, so this is a thistle root chai tea that we feed everyone every Saturday, and most of Durango now is part thistle. And so I'm just going to go over these 13 wild plants, but first I'm going to give you a little rap. There's a secret right beneath your toes. From the ground is where the riches grows. Everywhere in the world where humans live is a free superpower that nature gives. You have 13 weeds from which to choose. Use your intuition and you can't lose. You are wise, so when you take a little bite, ask how much or how little to you feels right. Look, all of the wild animals know what to do. Eat your wild greens and join the zoo. Okay. The whole of the dandelion is a wonderful food. A little bitter, a little sweet, put you in the mood. Grind their roots. Make your coffee from the roasted root and use the stem for a singing flute. And then in part of our, I've been in this long process of having Durango become an organic, working with organic land stewardship practices, but we've actually, over the last 7 to 10 years, worked with our parks and recreation with our city to get the parks in Durango to become organic. And we started the Dandelion Festival, which we have a dandelion mascot, and for the last 6 years we've been having dandelion festivals, and we get all the breweries. Durango's a small town. It only has about 15,000 people in the town, but we have 6 microbreweries in town. And so we like beer, and so all of the breweries in town get together, and we harvest the dandelions and the roots, and they make this dandelion beer that we serve at the Dandelion Festival. And it's the first weekend in May if you ever get a chance to come down to the festival. But we, in the process of this, we actually were given 1 organic park. And I said, okay, great, we have 1 park. Well, that wasn't enough. We asked for 2, and the city gave us 2 parks. And Turtle Lake Refuge would make compost tea. We would brew up we'd use microorganisms, and we would use worm castings, and we'd add a little kelp and molasses and culture it for 24 to 48 hours, and then we'd apply this compost tea on the park, which would help clean up the residues from the herbicides, but also feed the roots of the grass to help outcompete some of the other invaders, such as weeds. And because even though I like weeds, the city of Durango isn't necessarily an advocate that their parks turn that way, turn to weeds. So we tried to keep the park, still nice. But 2 parks wasn't quite enough. We kept asking for more, and they said, no, that's enough. You have a choice. So we wrote a city ordinance, and in the ordinance we asked that all parks overnight be turned 100% into organic. Well, this was, of course, not the most popular thing with the city. So there was this huge debate. This was the last election when Colorado voted marijuana to be legal, which was great. And we knew that we were going to win because we had a very liberal audience coming out to vote that year. And the city knew that too, so they asked us, hey, would you please pull your ordinance and let's get together and rewrite it. And we decided that was the wiser way to go. So we ended up meeting with the city council members, and we rewrote a resolution that did get passed unanimously, and we've moved it to where instead of it happening overnight, we're doing it in phases. And so the first phase is where we are, and over a third of the parks are now organic in Durango. So that's fabulous, yeah. Let's see. Wait, I'm not done with my presentation, and that was the end of my slides. How did that happen? Hold on a second. I have more plants to show you, but might need some assistance. So it just turned off, so I think.
Wasn't sure.
Do you
Unplug?
have a plug-in? Do you have an electric? Maybe it's out of power.
I've got 32%. But whatever is it.
If you have let's try that anyway.
Okay.
Do you have an electric cord?
No, I don't. Maybe that is what
You have electric cord in your,
happened.
where's Pascal? Pascal, do you have
No,
electric?
no.
That's okay. So, why don't we, I'll tell you the other plans in person. How about that? I think that will work just fine, and then I can take questions. So, turn the lights on? Yeah, maybe we can turn the lights on, and I'll come up here.
Go ahead and use the mic.
And I can use the mic, yes. Perfect. Great. All right, so you learned the dandelion. So then, how many of you know wild mallow? So mallow is mellow and good for your skin. It's slimy and emulsifying. Grind the whole plant into a goo. It makes fabulous lotion and shampoo. So the wild mallow is also edible, and we use the greens to make breadsticks and the roots to make milk. And anyway, it's a fabulous food. So, and if you need a first aid kit, plantain leaves and seeds are it. Chew the leaves into a mash. It helps with bites and stings and rash. So in plantain, not the banana plantain, but the green leaf plantain, when I'm on my walkabouts, I actually sometimes end up having to cross over a dirt road or something, and they like to grow on compacted trails and dirtways. But I'll end up gathering some of the seed stalks and just go like this, and then chew them up really nice. But I also store really well, so I'll throw a few in my pocket, and that's a really good food down the road. Let's see. Eat your dock greens when they're tender and sour, and grind their seeds to make your own flour. Yeah, that was the end of the slide, so that's all right. We don't have those slides up here for whatever reason. But how many of you know what wild dock looks like? Curly dock, yep. It's got long curly leaves. Don't be afraid of the prickle of the thistle. Drink down the juice, it'll make you want to whistle. Like a wild seed winging through the air, waving its arms like it just don't care. Put 'em up. So the thistle greens, it might be prickly, but what's amazing, there's no spines on the back, the very back rib, and so you can pick it without gloves, or you can use gloves. But throw it in your blender with a little water, an apple, some lemon. Blend it up, and then you strain out the prickles, and you've got the most alkaline juice that even Ebola would even, help keep our immune system really strong. And this is true.
You bring a stove, but you bring a blender?
What's that?
You don't bring a stove, but you bring a blender?
That's my blender.
You plug it into a current bush.
That's right. There's a lot of I can't remember that one. That's very good. Yeah, when I'm in the field, I just chew. But if I'm making it for my friends, I'll blend, and they don't want me to chew as much. So I'll blend it and strain it, and it's a fantastic green juice. And that's something where I came into this path partly because of my mom. Before I was born, she actually had arthritis for 12 years, she ended up having arthritis, and then she got inspired to do a juice fast. And I was 2 years old when she had this juice fast, and after 4 days of juicing, the pain that she was experiencing every day disappeared because of just decongesting her system. So I grew up with green juices twice a day. So it's something that I just really encourage, that the greens, when we bring in these wild greens into our diet, it alkalinizes us. And a lot of our human illnesses come when we get too acidic. And we get acidic from stress or toxins or whatever, but it's the greens that bring us back into balance. And so it's a real simple way to avoid hospitals, doctors, drugs, and then we can keep foraging and keeping embodied in a really joyful state. I want to check in with the time. How am I doing?
You're doing great.
Thank you. We're okay. Okay, so I won't stop us until we get all 13. Okay. Purslane is juicy and pretty, grows in the cracks of every single city. And who knows purslane? You know, that's a fabulous vitamin C plant, super delicious. And then there's chickweed, is good for your tummy, and it happens to be mighty, mighty yummy. Chickweed's a great one. And then there's knotweed, which is a wild buckwheat, grows low to the ground and it's hard to see it. It's nutty and funny indeed. The funny thing about it, it's not a weed. So knotweed is a plant that is, yeah, it's kind of like one of those plants you just don't even notice. You step on it because it just grows when nothing else can grow. And I think the magic about these 13 plants is that they can grow in inhospitable conditions. And so for me, whenever I just get off the airplane in a different country, like it could be in the Arctic or Japan or Hawaii or Alaska or California, I'll find these 13 plants. So they can grow, they do grow on every continent, minus Antarctica, because there's only 4 species, period, that grow there, yet 4 flowering species. But on all the places where human civilizations are permanent, these 13 plants grow. And the beautiful thing is that they're food and medicine, and so we can feel quite empowered by having them around. Let's see, who did we miss? We've got, then there's the 3-leaf clover has roots so deep, pulls up minerals from 100 feet. When you eat that clover flower and leaf, it strengthens your bones and strengthens your teeth. Yes, and let's see, what's next? We've got all the wild mustards with their petals of 4 are spicy and sweet enough to make you want more. Their flowers come in pink, purple, yellow, and white and get your creative juices flowing into the night. And so there's all the different wild mustard varieties, and they're all edible, which is super fun. So we have dandelion, dock, mallow, purslane, plantain. Oh, and then there's lamb's quarter and amaranth. Guess which one makes the quinoa plant? Lamb's quarter. Yeah, it's actually lamb's quarter. So quinoa comes from lamb's quarter. It's just there's so many different varieties of lamb's quarters. And so there's one lamb's quarter that grows in South America, and we in Colorado has a great crop of quinoa. But all the wild quinoa all the wild lamb's quarter that we see makes a seed that is edible and it can be used just like quinoa, cooked up or made into cereal. Sometimes it's harder to get the little sheath off of it. It takes a little bit of time. And then there's the wild amaranth, which has the little black seeds. Different varieties, of course, some have white, but they're packed with protein. And of course, the mushrooms are also really good sources of protein. And then you've got these really good plant sources of protein, which, it's like tiny seeds, but a little goes a long way. And that's what I find, when I eat wild, that I don't have to eat as much, and I get so much more energy from it, because it's so fresh and vital. So I think we did all 13. Yeah. All right. So that's the secret, and now you know where all the wild 13 plants do grow. They grow near you and they grow near me. They're full of wealth, but they're actually free. All right. Well, I'd love to open it up to questions. Yeah?
Have you ever eaten maygrass?
Maygrass.
Maygrass, yeah.
No.
Because apparently it was cultivated by the Mississippian culture in the East Coast. I'm just curious.
Well, all the wild grasses with their 8 amino acids, as a survival food, it can save your asses. That was one of them I forgot. Thanks for reminding me. Great.
So we saw the photos of the Amanita muscaria, but I didn't recall whether you said that you consumed it or not. So
Well, my friend Kate made this Amanita muscaria sort of a cocktail, and I did take a swig of that, but no, that's not one of my foraging foods. Definitely not. And it was very dilute and nothing happened. I did actually, way long ago, think that one of those little amanitas just coming up was a puffball, and I did take a bite, and then I realized, oh, you're gonna grow into that. And so I waited and watched, and nothing happened. So, but I had noticed that a chipmunk ate a bite first. Not that that's necessarily a good sign or a definite sign, but it didn't. Nothing happened to me personally, but I know that lots can happen. And so, yes, thanks for asking that question. But it's not a food. Thanks.
The clover, you're saying that the flowers, the stems, the leaves, they're all edible?
They're all edible. However, with the clover, they're potent, and so it depends on which variety, where it's growing, and how.
I thought there's some that you can only eat them at certain times of year.
Exactly.
Or you process them or something.
Definitely. And so really trust your tongue, because when you're out foraging, even if I've eaten it 60 times, when I come to this plant, I've never met that specific plant before, and I don't know, and I'm different, and it's growing in a new place and a different age, so I always take a tiny, tiny little bit and really trust my tongue. And because clovers are one of those that can be delicious or can be way too strong, and you might just want just a tiny bite, and that's enough. Or you might say, yeah, actually, I'd like to make a green juice with this. But I never make a green juice without eating it first. So I have time for my body to say, stop, that's enough. Good question. All right, way back there. Sorry.
How do you make sure that what you eat is not poisonous?
How do you make sure that it's not poisonous? So you go small, small stages. You first learn what is poisonous, and you don't eat that. So for example, poison hemlock looks like parsley. So when you're out there, just don't eat anything that has white umbrella-like flowers that looks like parsley. You don't even taste that. You just wait until you get more experienced. And you start with what you do know, like a dandelion. Oh, big yellow flower. Okay, I can recognize that one. And then you start going slow, and they become the teachers, and they lead you to the next plant. And lots of us can become teachers. And we're all, yeah. Good question. And they're in the book, actually, the book that is just out, like truly, I have one copy, that's it. Some people have gotten one, I've heard. But Chelsea Green just published this book called The Wild Wisdom of Weeds, and in that book, there's a real clear guideline on that question of how you be safe.
Do we forage for insects?
Great question. So I was going to go to a potluck one day, and we were digging in our manure pile, and there were these grub worms, and they were packed full, and we were joking, saying, hey, let's bring these to the potluck. But then we're like, well, we better eat one before we bring it to all these people. So I did. I ate one, and it was the worst thing I've ever eaten. I screamed. It was so bad. It tasted just like manure.
Oh.
So what's that?
Have you tried strawberry ceviche with it?
No. Yeah, I think insects are a great food. I'm not quite the culinary expert yet. A few grasshoppers here and there.
What's your take on foraging in urban environments?
So I actually do forage in urban environments. And it's one of those things, I use my intuition very much. And I also use my observational skills. And when I'm passing through, I don't know the total history. I don't know what the city's patterns are on spraying or what the neighbors have done. So I use my smell, and I definitely look around, and I tune in to the plant, and then I just taste it. And a lot of times, if it's been sprayed, it will actually, my tongue will tell me, blah, and I won't eat anymore. But if it hasn't, and it looks vital to me, I'll eat it. So I do forage in the city. Yep.
I'm actually from Brooklyn, and
Yeah.
I've done,
Yahoo!
I have a garden in my backyard, and I've done the soil test, and had like super high levels of lead, and that's like very common all throughout Brooklyn especially. So I was just,
Yeah. And so that's,
it all depends on it.
it really does. And living in this 21st century, I don't know that we're going to escape that in some ways. I mean, we definitely try to do the best, harvest in the best places you can. But even, a lot of our food is grown right by interstates. And, so it's hard to say that we're not getting it in a lot of our food. So then I actually look to the plants. And one of those plants that can help take heavy metals out of the system is burdock. And actually, I think a lot of these dark greens like dandelion and lamb's quarter and amaranth can also help with that. But there are plants, cilantro. Yep, that's right. And so these plants are our friends, even, like they actually help detoxify us, So, yeah. Yeah.
I don't have a question, but I'm a herbalist for 40 years, and I'm so happy to see young people so excited and so experimental and so sharing what you're learning, and it just fills me with a lot of excitement about our future.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. That's great. Yeah.
So I guess, I mean, do you know any particular species that are native to this area, say that are extra tasty? I mean, there are the 13 cosmopolitan plants, but maybe there are some things that I should know as someone who lives in the Bay Area. I mean, there's miner's lettuce, but
Elderberry.
Elderberry, the bay nuts, right? They're coming on.
can we eat those?
Mm-hmm.
Fennel.
Oregon grape,
The Oregon
berries.
grape. So there are so many. So maybe start by just going out with a friend who knows a little bit. Because it is fun to be guided. You know, you can look at books, and that's a good way. But if you have somebody who's actually knows the plant, it's a lot faster. So yeah, just going out with your friends and take a plant class. What's that?
Well, there's seaweeds out
Yeah,
there.
there's
There's all kinds of
seaweed.
wonderful things.
Oh my goodness,
But
so
really,
much.
if you go with someone who knows, then you feel more secure than
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah, it's nice to go out with others and share the knowledge. And actually, if you want, tomorrow I am teaching in Berkeley at the Ecology Center store. And then before that, I'm available to take anyone who wants to go on a walk. And we can walk the streets, but we might go down to this community garden center.
What time?
Let's meet at 5 o'clock at the Ecology Center store.
And is that the morning?
5 o'clock in the afternoon, good question. 5 p.m. And then the slideshow starts at 7, or the top. And I will actually make some treats, so I'm going to borrow a blender, and we'll make up something. Either some juice or some thistle chai or something. Yeah.
When I was a kid, my mother used to experiment, and we ate elderflower dipped in batter and fried,
Ooh.
and German milkweed thistle,
Yeah.
the early things, and cattails.
Yeah.
Cattail stems.
Yeah. So amazing.
I know.
So delicious.
Have you had the experience with archistaples, manzanita berries?
Yeah, the manzanita, I had one today. They've got some good seeds in there, but they're very delicious. And I just chew them up and then spit out the seeds. But you can also, there's lots of recipes to use them, making, sour patties. And you can blend them up and strain out the seeds too, to make lemonade.
what was that?
The manzanita berries. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned eating some of the wild mushrooms raw to some degree. Can you kind of elaborate?
Yeah, I know there's a pretty standard, don't eat any mushrooms raw, although I had it in my salad tonight. But, meadow mushrooms.
Still here.
Yeah. But, and again, I tend not to live by rules. And if they're, I like to break all the rules. Or I test them, I'll listen to them and I'll think, well, that's interesting or that's wise. But then if my intuition tells me differently, then I actually go with that instead. And so for mushrooms, I don't necessarily say eat them all raw by any means, but for me, my experience is I like 2 of them raw, and that's the kimboleets and the puffballs. And then the rest, I need them to be either marinated or cooked for me to like them. But those 2 I actually feel, and I don't eat a lot of them. I just eat like a couple bites, and that's like my body says that's enough. Or maybe I'll eat. And they have to be perfect too. Choice. Otherwise I won't eat them. Yeah.
Do you ever experiment with other mushrooms besides those 2 raw?
Yeah, I taste almost all the mushrooms, like the russulas, the shrimp russulas, and the hawk wings. And
You swallow or you spit out?
I swallow them. But it would be a tiny bit, and it would be just enough to where my body can tell me, like, oh, I like this or I don't like this. And the rest of them had told me, like, no, I don't like this. So I listened to that. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned a lot of sour
fruits that you find in nature. If I were out in nature lost somewhere, I'd have a hard time. Oh, that's sour. What's the sweetest thing you ever found?
I know, I focused them totally on the sour just because I was thinking of the marinade, you know, so I put all the marinades in there. But really there's so many sweets too. Like the wild blueberries are sweet, and the strawberries and the raspberries are sweet, and the gooseberries.
How about any of the greens?
And then the greens are just good sources of protein, good sources of chlorophyll and enzymes, but not so sweet, but definitely some savory, but just some hearty. Some bitter, but not all. Like dandelion's bitter, we know that, but a lot of the greens aren't bitter.
Mine's lettuce is not bad.
It's amazing. Yeah, miner's lettuce is like choice.
In
And
Germany,
chickweed.
where I was trained, they say bitter ist gut. Because they know if you take bitter in every day, your taste buds are refined and you'll taste things.
That's
But
right.
in the English language, bitter is bad. So we have to get over that.
Yes, and bitters, excitingly, they kind of are like a workout for our inner organs, like our livers. It's like it gives them a little bit of a workout where by moving them like this, by eating the bitters, we cleanse the liver, the kidneys, so that they're more useful in this 21st century to cleanse more toxins that keep coming. So we need our bitters, we need our greens to do that, to keep efficient. And I think what I love about all this is that it's so accessible to humanity because they're growing around us and they're usually in abundance and they're free. And so it's just this really amazing knowledge that we get to reclaim. Yeah, Ken.
So, you were describing marinades. Are you only using sour things that have acids in them in order to create your... So would you describe a little bit about proportions and quantities and the sort of the theory behind it as far as marinade cooking?
Yeah.
Keep cooking?
So like this summer when I did my ceviche marinade with the chanterelles, and then I threw in a few wild onions, and then I used strawberries because that's just happened to be the abundant crop. And I just mashed it all together. And what I didn't measure, but what I noticed was that the juices will start coming out of the mushrooms because of the berries. And the berries have juice too. So once it gets juicy enough, where everything's coated and covered, that's sort of the proportion you're looking for, is to get it juicy. And salt. We actually had a little bit of salt. So I put that into, and that made a difference. But I did one before without salt, and it still worked great. But yeah, salt also draws out the juices. But so does the berries and the ascorbic acids.
Do you ever do wild soils, like clays and things like that might either be salty or have certain minerals in it?
Like add the soil to my food?
Put dirt in it, yeah.
You asking me if I eat dirt?
Don't you have a rap about dirt?
Yeah. Dirt is good. Yeah. So with dirt, this is what I love to do is culture. I love to make sauerkrauts with wild root vegetables like the dandelion root or the dock or the burdock or mallow. And I can never wash all the dirt off because there's so many little crevices, and I actually don't try to wash it all off. So I chop it up with a little bit of the dirt still in the root and then culture that. And the microorganisms in the soil get cultured into my kraut, and I feel that's super beneficial. So yeah, dirt is good. Great. One more question.
What was your most bountiful wild harvest for like one meal?
Oh. Well, I usually eat one thing at a time when I'm out there. Like, rarely do I become a culinary chef when I'm in the woods. I do it at home and with sharing with people, but when I'm out there, it's like, well, whatever I find is that's the feast. And it's sometimes, some days, like when I'm hiking, it's really abundant, and then some days are really sparse. And I might find like one berry for like hours, or, So it's like when I get to that one berry, I'm so filled with gratitude that I don't think it's the berry that feeds me, it's just the gratitude. So I think the feast comes from so many levels of nourishment. Yeah. Great. Thank you all so much.